Imagine being trapped inside a windowless, vertical stone tower, perched on a sheer cliffside 2,100 meters above the frozen earth. Outside, an armed raiding party circles the base in the dark, but your family has already pulled the wooden access ladder inside, sealing the heavy stone entrance 10 feet above the ground. Inside this fortress, you must survive for months on stored livestock and dried grain, knowing that a single lapse in vigilance means the absolute end of your entire lineage. This was not a scene from a fantasy epic. It was the weekly reality of survival in the high, isolated valleys of the Caucasus. For centuries, the shadow of the blood feud hung over these mountains, forcing communities to build their lives not around comfort, but around the cold, hard geometry of defense. This might be the most overlooked and misunderstood region on our planet. Most people cannot even point to it on a map, which means they never realize the breathtaking secrets they are missing. It is a place where glaciated peaks, parched deserts, medieval stone fortresses, and even burning hills exist within just a few hundred kilometers of each other. The reason these extremes coexist is more surprising than you think, representing a violent, beautiful collision of physical geography, warring empires, and ancient, unyielding identities. To understand the Caucasus, you must understand that this region was never shaped by a single force. It was carved by the collision of tectonic plates, the rise and fall of massive empires, the friction of world religions, and the preservation of distinct local cultures that refused to be erased. For thousands of years, the great mountain barrier stretching between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea created one of the most fragmented human landscapes on Earth. The Greater Caucasus Range, with peaks rising above 5,000 meters, did not just divide ecosystems, they divided human populations. When deep valleys are separated by ridges nearly 3 miles high, human communities develop in absolute, frozen isolation. Over time, that physical isolation hardens into distinct languages, unique traditions, spectacular architecture, and localized laws. Today, more than 40 completely distinct languages are spoken across the Caucasus. These are not mere accents. They are entirely different language families, some of which are found nowhere else on the planet. In certain highland regions, villages separated by just 15 miles historically could not understand a single word of each other's speech. This level of linguistic density is almost unmatched anywhere else on the globe, turning the mountains into a living Tower of Babel. But geography alone does not explain this cultural density. The Caucasus sits at one of the most strategically sensitive crossroads in Eurasia. It is a vital isthmus connecting Eastern Europe and Western Asia, spanning approximately 170,000 square miles. To the south, Persian empires expanded and retreated for centuries. To the west, Roman and later Byzantine influence pushed inward. From the north came waves of steppe migrations, followed by Russian imperial expansion. From the southeast, Turkic peoples reshaped the demographic landscape. This region was never peripheral to global history. It was directly in the path of it. Every marching army, every merchant caravan, and every fleeing refugee had to pass through these narrow mountain corridors. This constant pressure created a cultural layering unlike almost anywhere else on Earth, where new influences did not replace the old, but rather accumulated like geological strata. In the early 4th century, around 301 AD, parts of the Caucasus adopted Christianity as a state religion, making it among the earliest Christian regions in the world, nearly 1,700 years ago. Yet, they did so while directly bordering the powerful Zoroastrian Persian Empire, where fire temples represented political as much as spiritual authority. Religion here was never purely theological. It was a matter of geopolitical identity and survival. Later, Islam spread across parts of the region, especially in the north and east. Yet, older pre-Christian and Zoroastrian rituals did not simply vanish. In some areas, sacred sites were repurposed rather than abandoned, and pre-Christian rituals blended into new religious frameworks. The result is a mesmerizing accumulation of belief systems coexisting in both visible and invisible ways. At the same time, the Caucasus was deeply connected to global trade networks. Branches of the Silk Road ran along its southern edges, linking East Asia to Europe. Caravans carrying silk, spices, and precious metals passed through mountain corridors that could be controlled or contested. Whoever held these routes held immense global influence. And that influence became even more critical in the 19th century, when oil transformed the Eastern Caucasus into one of the world's earliest major energy centers. By the early 1900s, this region was producing more than half of the global oil supply. Railways expanded, foreign capital flowed in, and industrial zones developed rapidly. But while coastal cities modernized quickly, the high mountain settlements remained geographically isolated. There are settlements over 2,000 meters above sea level, where winter snowfall historically closed access routes for months. When passes were blocked, communities relied entirely on stored food, livestock, and social cohesion. And that is where one of the most striking cultural traits of the Caucasus becomes visible: hospitality. In several Caucasian cultures, a guest is not merely welcomed, they are protected. Once someone crossed your threshold, they were under your safeguard, even if severe outside tensions existed. In a land shaped by unpredictable travel, hospitality became a survival mechanism. As we stand on the precipice of this forgotten world, we are about to venture into its most hidden corners, from Europe's highest dormant volcano to cave cities carved into solid cliffs. If you are ready for this epic journey, drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. Hit the like button, subscribe to Earth Discovered, and turn on notifications so you never miss more of our upcoming videos. Let us dive deep into the mountains, where the secrets of the past are waiting to be uncovered. To travel into the heart of the Caucasus is to enter a realm where the earth itself rises up to challenge the sky, a landscape of raw, vertical drama that forces you to confront your own insignificance. As we leave behind the complex geopolitical maps of human history, we must look up to the ancient, immutable forces that truly govern this land, the great peaks of the Western Caucasus. These mountains do not merely sit on the horizon, they dominate every aspect of life, weather and survival in the valleys below. They are silent watchmen, guarding secrets that stretch back millions of years, back to a time before empires had names, and before humans had ever set foot in these high, windswept passes. Our journey upward begins at the absolute crown of the continent. At 5,642 meters, about 18,510 feet, Mount Elbrus stands officially as the highest peak in Europe. This fact alone catches many travelers by surprise, as they expect Europe's highest point to lie somewhere in the French Alps. But Elbrus is a different kind of giant. Unlike the sharp, jagged alpine spires of Western Europe, Elbrus is a colossus of volcanic origin. It is a massive dormant stratovolcano, its twin summits rising like two frozen domes covered by a permanent, blinding ice cap. This glacial shield feeds a network of massive glaciers that stretch several kilometers down its rugged slopes, carving deep valleys into the earth like ancient, slow-moving rivers of ice. To stand at the base of Elbrus is to feel a strange, quiet tension. Though the mountain is considered dormant, it is far from dead. Beneath the thick armor of ice and snow, geothermal activity still whispers in the dark. Scientists estimate that the volcano's last major eruption occurred approximately 2,000 years ago, a mere blink of an eye in geological time. Deep within the mountain, the Earth's internal furnace still burns, warming the rock and occasionally releasing sulfurous gases through hidden vents in the snow. It is a place of profound silence, but it is a silence charged with the memory of past cataclysms and the potential for future ones. The mountain demands absolute respect, for the weather here can transform from a serene, sunlit blue to a raging, blinding blizzard in a matter of minutes, trapping the unprepared in a frozen wilderness where rescue is impossible. Yet, the dangers of Elbrus have never deterred those driven by ambition, ego, or the thirst for conquest. During the darkest days of World War II, this frozen summit became the stage for one of the most bizarre and symbolic campaigns in military history. In 1942, as the German army pushed deep into the Soviet Union in search of the oil fields of Baku, a specialized unit of mountain troops, the Gebirgsjäger, marched up the icy slopes of Elbrus. They did not climb for tactical advantage. The peak held no real military value in a war of tanks and artillery. Instead, they climbed for prestige. They struggled through the thin air and freezing winds to plant the swastika flag near the summit. It was a propaganda victory, designed to signal to the world that Germany had conquered the highest point in Europe, controlling the narrative of the war from the rooftop of the continent. But the triumph was short-lived. The Soviet response was fueled by a fierce, ideological fury. Soviet Alpine troops were dispatched into the freezing heights, navigating treacherous crevasses to tear down the enemy flag and reclaim the mountain, proving that even the highest peaks could not be permanently conquered by invading forces. Just a few hours' drive to the southeast of this volcanic giant, the landscape undergoes a sudden and breathtaking metamorphosis. The broad, rounded domes of Elbrus vanish, replaced by a world that is sharp, vertical, and infinitely more intimate. This is Dombe, a region defined not by a single dominating summit, but by a dense compressed cluster of jagged granite ridges, deep alpine valleys, and glaciers that hang suspended over ancient forests. While Elbrus feels vast and distant, Dombe feels immediate and imposing, its walls rising so steeply around you that the sky is reduced to a narrow ribbon of blue. What makes Dombe so visually arresting is the sheer speed of its ecological transitions. Within an incredibly short distance, you can stand in a dense, primeval pine forest at 1,600 meters, roughly 5,200 feet, breathing in the damp scent of moss, wet earth, and rushing glacial streams, while looking directly up at towering glaciers that descend almost into the treetops. The highest points in this rugged area rise above 4,000 meters, over 13,000 feet, creating a vertical classroom of climate zones, stacked one on top of the other. In the mid-20th century, during the height of the Soviet Union, Dombe was transformed into the premier alpine playground of the USSR. Mountaineering clubs established their bases here, training generations of climbers to survive the extreme environments of the Pamirs and the Tian Shan. Cable cars, first installed in the 1960s, still ascend the steep slopes, offering passengers a silent, swinging journey over dizzying gorges and dark pine forests. But Dombe has managed to preserve its wild heart. It remains a protected biosphere reserve, a sanctuary for species that have vanished from the rest of Europe. Among the jagged crags lives the West Caucasian tur, a magnificent mountain goat with massive, sweeping horns, perfectly adapted to navigating near vertical rock faces, where a single slip means death. To watch these animals move effortlessly across sheer cliffs is to realize that this is their world, a place where humans are merely temporary, fragile observers. As we look up at these colossal peaks, it is impossible not to feel a deep emotional pull. There is a unique kind of peace that can only be found in places as this high, this cold, and this quiet. Have you ever stood in a place so vast that it made your daily worries and struggles feel completely insignificant? What is the most beautiful or intimidating mountain landscape you have ever witnessed with your own eyes? And how did it change your perspective? Please take a moment to share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with a friend who needs to experience the majestic, untamed beauty of our planet. From the towering glacial heights of the Western Caucasus, we descend now into a world where geography did not merely shape human survival, it forced it into a state of perpetual, vertical fortress building. This is Svaneti, a historical and rugged mountain province of northern Georgia that has remained frozen in a medieval dream for over 1,000 years. Encircled by colossal peaks rising up to 5,000 meters into the thin, frozen air, Svaneti is the highest inhabited region in the entire Caucasus system. Here, the sheer walls of deep, vertical gorges cut off individual villages from the outside world and, more importantly, from each other. When you enter this region, you are immediately struck by an architectural phenomenon unlike anything else on Earth. Hundreds of ancient, slender stone towers piercing the mountain mist like frozen stone fingers, standing as silent monuments to a dark history of isolation, survival, and blood. These are the Svan Towers, or Koshki, as they are known by the indigenous Svan people. The Svan are not just any mountain community, they are an ancient, distinct ethnic subgroup of Georgians who settled these impenetrable valleys nearly 2 millennia ago. Because of their extreme physical isolation, the Svans developed a highly distinct culture, preserving an unwritten language that is entirely separate from standard Georgian. The Svan language is an incredibly archaic tongue that has retained complex linguistic features, dating as far back as 1900 BC. In this high, glaciated sanctuary, their language, laws and customs remained untouched by the outside empires that periodically swept through the lower valleys of the Caucasus. While Persians, Mongols and Ottoman Turks regularly carved up the surrounding lowlands, the high passes of Svaneti remained practically impregnable, a natural fortress where external invaders rarely dared to tread. But the primary threat to a Svan family did not always come from distant, foreign empires. Often, the most lethal enemy was the neighbor living just across the narrow, muddy street. For centuries, Svan society was governed by a brutal, unyielding custom of blood revenge, known locally as litzfri. This was a medieval system of tribal justice, where a grave insult, a land dispute, or a theft of livestock could only be resolved through the letting of blood. If a member of one family killed or insulted a member of another, the victim's family was culturally obligated to seek revenge by killing either the offender or one of their male relatives. This act of vengeance, however, did not settle the score. Instead, it initiated a devastating, cyclical blood feud that could persist for generations, spanning centuries until the original cause of the conflict was entirely forgotten, shrouded in local folklore. A family could find itself in a state of active, lethal warfare with another clan for 100 years, where stepping outside one's home meant risking a sudden, fatal arrow to the chest. It was this constant state of domestic instability, combined with occasional raids from northern Caucasian tribes across the mountain passes, that gave birth to Svaneti's iconic defensive architecture. Rather than building a singular, massive fortress to protect an entire village, Svan families took defense into their own hands, building individual fortresses on a family-by-family basis. Constructed primarily between the 9th and 12th centuries, during Georgia's Golden Age, these towers were built to house and protect extended family clans that could number up to 100 people. Standing between 3 and 5 stories tall, with a distinct tapering profile, the towers are masterworks of medieval masonry. The ground floor of each tower was built with incredibly thick slate and granite walls, sometimes exceeding 1.5 meters in depth, which gradually thinned as the structure climbed toward the sky, to prevent the tower from collapsing under its own immense weight. The most striking feature of these towers is their absolute lack of vulnerability at ground level. The lower floors were constructed entirely without windows, doors, or access points. The actual entrance to the tower was positioned 12 to 15 feet above the ground, accessible only by a heavy wooden ladder. In times of crisis, the entire family clan, along with their most valuable belongings and a supply of dried meat, grain, and water, would scramble up the ladder. Once inside the stone chamber, they would haul the wooden ladder up behind them, effectively sealing themselves off from the physical world. Just inside the raised entrance, large flat boulders were kept on standby. These massive stones could be released over the opening to seal the inhabitants securely inside. From the narrow window slits on the upper floors, defenders could shoot arrows, hurl heavy stones, and pour boiling water down upon any attackers foolish enough to gather at the base. Because raiding parties or rival clans were lightly equipped for rapid hit-and-run strikes, they lacked the siege engines necessary to breach these stone giants. A siege could last for weeks or even months, and almost invariably, the attackers would run out of supplies and retreat long before the defenders inside starved. Directly attached to these defensive towers was a two-story stone house known as a machubi. During the long, brutal Svan winters, when deep snow blocked the passes and temperatures plunged far below freezing, the machubi served as the warm, beating heart of family life. The ground floor was a shared, communal space, where the family lived directly alongside their domestic livestock. The body heat of cattle, sheep, and horses kept the stone chamber warm, while a central open hearth burned wood gathered from the high alpine forests. It is a striking image of survival. Human beings, domestic animals, and ancient traditions packed tightly together in a windowless, smoky room beneath a massive stone fortress, while the Arctic mountain winds howled outside. Today, over 200 of these ancient towers still stand, clustered primarily around a group of 4 high-altitude settlements, known collectively as Ushkuli. Sitting at an altitude of 2,100 meters above sea level, Ushkuli is officially recognized as one of the highest continuously inhabited settlements in all of Europe. Here, daily life still carries the heavy, majestic rhythm of the past. The massive glaciers of Mount Shkara loom directly over the village skyline, their white icy domes casting a permanent shadow over the dark stone towers below. While modern tourism has slowly begun to open roads to this remote sanctuary, Svaneti remains a place where the air feels different, heavy with the memory of ancient laws and the unyielding spirit of survival. Svan culture is a living museum, famously captured in films like D-Day, which was shot on location in Ushkuli, and exposed the harsh realities of arranged marriages, abductions, and blood feuds that persisted in these isolated valleys well into the late 20th century. The sheer resilience of the Svan people forces us to look inward and examine our own modern lives, which are so thoroughly insulated from the raw physical struggles of survival. To think that families lived, loved, and fought for centuries within these tight stone walls, entirely dependent on their own strength and the loyalty of their clan, is deeply humbling. It makes one wonder about the nature of community and trust. If you were suddenly transported back to the medieval heights of Svaneti, surrounded by warring clans and unforgiving winters, who is the one person in your life you would trust to guard the ladder of your stone tower? What is the ultimate sacrifice you would make to protect your family's legacy? Take a moment to think about this, and share your thoughts in the comments section below. If this deep dive into the hidden history of Svaneti resonated with you, please hit the like button, share this video with someone who loves history, and make sure you are subscribed, so we can continue this journey together. But our exploration of the High Caucasus is far from over. As we turn our eyes eastward, away from the tight, blood-feud haunted valleys of Svaneti, we must look toward a different kind of giant, a solitary symmetrical volcano that carries a story older than the villages below, where myth, religion, and empire collided at the foot of an impossibly placed stone church. Let us move forward, for the mountains are calling us deeper into the mist. As we pull away from the shadow of Svaneti's ancient fortresses, our path turns sharply eastward, tracing the rugged spine of the Greater Caucasus. The chaotic, crowded valleys of the west gradually give way to a landscape dominated by a singular, colossal presence. There, rising with near-perfect, terrifying symmetry into the freezing sky, stands Mount Kazbek. Known locally as Mikinvatsveri, which translates to the Ice Peak, this dormant stratovolcano dominates the eastern Caucasus, reaching an elevation of 5,054 meters, about 16,581 feet. Unlike Mount Elbrus, which shares its volcanic origins but spreads its weight across a massive, dual-domed ridge, Kazbek rises almost entirely alone. It is a vertical monolith of rock, ice, and ash, standing as a solitary sentinel over one of the most historically contested borders in human history. To look upon Kazbek is to understand why this peak has, for thousands of years, captured the human imagination and been shrouded in myth, terror, and divine mystery. For the ancient civilizations that lived in its permanent shadow, the mountain was not merely a physical feature of the earth. It was a living, breathing giant. In Greek mythology, this is the legendary site where Prometheus was chained by Zeus, as a brutal punishment for stealing fire from the gods, and gifting it to humanity. For eternity, Prometheus was condemned to have his liver torn out daily by a giant eagle, only for it to regrow each night in the freezing alpine wind. But the Georgians have an even older, deeper version of this story. They tell of Amirani, a demigod hero who defied the supreme deity by bringing the knowledge of metallurgy and fire to the human race. Amirani was dragged to the frozen heart of Kazbek, chained inside a massive cave deep beneath the glaciers, where his faithful dog constantly licks his chains to wear them thin, only for the divine blacksmiths to strengthen them every year. This myth is not merely a colorful story. It is an emotional reflection of the human condition in the Caucasus, a testament to human defiance, endurance, and the heavy price of survival against forces that are infinitely larger and colder than ourselves. But Kazbek was more than a monument of myth. It was a vital pawn in the geopolitical chess games of global empires. The volcano sits directly above the Darial Gorge, a vertical cleft in the mountain wall carved over millions of years by the roaring Terek River. For millennia, this gorge, historically known as the Gates of the Alans or the Caucasian Gates, was the only viable military pass slicing through the center of the Greater Caucasus Range. It was the narrow throat of Eurasia. To the north lay the endless wild steppes, home to nomadic warrior tribes like the Scythians, the Alans, and the Huns. To the south lay the wealthy, sedentary empires of Persia, Rome, and Byzantium. Whoever controlled the pass beneath Mount Kazbek controlled the flow of human migration and imperial conquest. Roman legions built fortresses here. Persian emperors paid tribute to keep the gates closed, and eventually, the Russian Empire carved the Georgian military road directly through these cliffs in the 19th century to secure their hold on the South Caucasus. Kazbek watched in silent, frozen indifference as the armies of the world marched through the dark canyons below, its glaciers reflecting the fire of burning empires. Yet, perched on a high grassy ridge beneath the colossal shifting glaciers of the volcano, sits a site that completely redefines the scale of this brutal landscape. This is the Greater Trinity Church, or Sminda Sameba, standing solitary against the sky at an altitude of 2,170 meters, about 7,120 feet. Built in the 14th century, this stone church is a masterwork of medieval architecture, but its power does not come from intricate ornamentation or grand design. It comes from its impossible setting. Against the massive, 3-mile-high volcanic backdrop of Kazbek, the church appears incredibly small, a fragile stone cross clinging to the edge of a cliff. It is a visual metaphor for human faith and resilience, a tiny, defiant spark of human warmth built in a realm that belongs entirely to ice, rock and wind. During the dark centuries of medieval invasions, when Mongol hordes, Persian armies, and Ottoman Turks regularly burned the lower valleys and laid waste to the capital city of Tbilisi, Greater Trinity Church served a purpose far beyond the spiritual. It was the ultimate vault of the Georgian kingdom. Because of its extreme elevation and near impenetrable location, the church was virtually impossible to besiege. When danger neared, the national treasures, sacred manuscripts, and most precious religious relics of the country, including the legendary grapevine cross of Saint Nino, which brought Christianity to Georgia in the 4th century, were carried up the steep, treacherous mountain paths on foot and horseback. The monks would seal themselves inside the stone sanctuary, protected by the vertical cliffs and the unpredictable fury of the mountain weather. The church was a fortress of the soul, a place where the cultural memory and identity of an entire nation were kept safe from the fires of destruction below. To step inside Greater Trinity Church today is to leave the modern world completely behind. The interior is dark, windowless and entirely austere. The stone walls, blackened by centuries of candle soot and incense, offer no elaborate decorations or grand icons. The air is cold and heavy with silence, broken only by the low, resonant chanting of Orthodox monks and the distant, hollow howl of the wind beating against the ancient stone exterior. Standing inside this dark chamber, you can feel the weight of the millions of pilgrims who have made the arduous journey up this mountain over the last 700 years. It is a place of absolute decompression, a sanctuary where the noise of human civilization is silenced by the vast, quiet majesty of the mountains. This stark contrast between the chaos of the world and the deep, silent peace of the mountains forces us to ask a profound question about our own search for sanctuary. In a modern world that is constantly loud, demanding and overwhelming, we all face moments where we feel besieged by life's relentless storms. Have you ever felt the desperate need to climb away from the noise, to find your own personal Gurjati, that quiet, isolated place of peace where you can protect what is most sacred to you? What is your ultimate sanctuary when the world becomes too heavy to bear? And how far would you go to protect your inner peace? Please share your thoughts and personal stories in the comments section below. I read every single response, and your insights bring incredible depth to our global community. If the silent majesty of Getty and the mythic power of Kazbek moved you, please hit the like button, share this video with someone who is searching for their own quiet sanctuary, and make sure you are subscribed to Earth Discovered, so we can continue climbing higher. But our journey is about to take an even more extreme turn. As we look northeast from the heights of Kazbek, we must prepare to venture into Tusheti, a high-altitude basin that remains completely cut off from the physical world for 9 months of the year, accessible only by navigating the Abano Pass. Rising to nearly 3,000 meters, this is not merely a mountain road, it is widely considered one of the most treacherous, narrow and deadly drives on our planet, a path lined with roadside memorials, where a single mistake means a plunge into a vertical abyss. To truly understand the Caucasus, You must eventually leave behind the paved highways, the safety of modern infrastructure, and the comfort of maps. You must turn your gaze toward the northeastern corner of Georgia, where a historical region named Tusheti sits locked behind a wall of rock that rises nearly 3,000 meters into the clouds. Tusheti is not just a place, it is a time capsule, a hidden basin of 48 villages scattered across 3 pristine valleys. For 9 months of the year, this entire territory is completely severed from the modern world. When the first autumn snow dusts the high peaks in October, the single unpaved dirt track that leads into this wilderness is buried under avalanches, and Tusheti falls into a silent, frozen hibernation. It does not wake up again until June, when the relentless summer sun finally melts the snowdrifts, enough to uncover the road. This single legendary path is the Abano Pass. Reaching an elevation of 2,826 meters, about 9,271 feet, it is officially the highest drivable mountain pass in the entire Caucasus range. But to call it a road is an understatement. It is a single-track ledge, carved directly into the vertical shale cliffs, with a sheer mountain wall on one side and a dizzying, 1,000-meter drop-off on the other. There are no guardrails, no paved surfaces, and no room for error. The track is constantly reshaped by landslides, mountain waterfalls, and sudden, blinding washouts. Dense fog can roll in within seconds, reducing visibility to less than a meter, and transforming the journey into a blind, terrifying crawl along the edge of an abyss. Locally, it is known as the Death Road. The entire route is lined with rusted, windswept metal crosses and roadside memorials, grim monuments dedicated to the local drivers, travelers, and shepherds who lost their lives to a single miscalculation on these tight hairpin turns. Yet, this treacherous path is the stage for one of the most ancient, epic, and physically demanding human journeys left on our planet, the transhumance. For at least 500 years, the semi-nomadic shepherds of Tusheti have moved their immense flocks of sheep, horses, and cattle between seasonal pastures. This is not a historical reenactment or a tourist spectacle. It is a raw, brutal struggle for survival that dictates the very rhythm of life in these mountains. In the spring, as the valley snows melt, the shepherds gather their herds in the wine-growing plains of Kakheti and begin a grueling, multi-week march upward to the lush, high-protein alpine meadows of Tusheti. In the autumn, as the Arctic winds return, they make the equally perilous journey back down to the warm, semi-desert plains near the Azerbaijani border. The scale of this migration is staggering. A single shepherding clan will drive a flock of up to 1,200 tough, regional Tusheti sheep across 72 kilometers of vertical terrain. The physical toll on both the humans and the animals is immense. The shepherds, often brothers, uncles, and cousins, who have spent their entire lives on these trails, easily cover more than 30 miles a day on foot or horseback. Their daily diet is basic, consisting of bread, canned fish, and a strong, homemade Georgian grape pomace brandy known as chacha, which they drink in quick, burning shots to keep their blood warm in the freezing mountain air. At night, there are no tents or cabins. They wrap themselves in heavy woolen coats and sleep directly on the cold, rocky mountainside under a canopy of stars, keeping one eye open for thieves, predators, and sudden weather shifts. Every single crossing of the Abano Pass demands a heavy sacrifice. The shepherds must navigate raging, freezing glacial rivers where the water reaches the saddles of their horses, and where a single slip can sweep a sheep or a horse down the torrent. When dense mountain fog descends upon the pass, the world vanishes into a blinding white silence. In this thick mist, sheep easily lose their footing on the narrow, slippery slate ledges, tumbling into the deep gorges below. It is a mathematical certainty of the trail. Every year, some animals will die. They are lost to the fog, frozen to death in sudden blizzards, or taken by the wolves that constantly stalk the edges of the migration. But the shepherds do not fight these elements alone. Their most crucial allies are their silent giant guardians, the Caucasian shepherd dogs. These are not ordinary domestic dogs. They are ancient, massive mountain mastiffs bred specifically to survive the extreme cold and to protect the flock from predators. Fierce, highly intelligent, and intensely loyal, these dogs are the literal backbone of the migration. They are bred to have a thick, coarse coat that matches the exact color and texture of the sheep they guard. This natural disguise is a brilliant, evolutionary strategy. Wolves hunting in the fog cannot easily distinguish between a defenseless sheep and a 100-pound predator in sheep's clothing until it is too late. These dogs patrol the perimeter of the moving white line of sheep, their deep, resonant barks echoing through the canyons, warning any lurking predators that to step closer is to invite a lethal, territorial battle. When the exhausted shepherds and their battered flocks finally cross the Abano Pass and descend into the pristine valleys of Tusheti, the abandoned stone villages suddenly surge back to life. For a few glorious summer months, the high meadows are filled with the sweet scent of alpine bluegrass and the sound of bells. The rich, high-protein grass gives the sheep's milk a unique, incredibly strong flavor, which is used to produce tusheri gouda, a prized aromatic cheese aged traditionally inside a clean sheepskin bag. Around the evening campfires, as the cheese is cured and the sheep are sheared, the shepherds share songs, stories, and wine, celebrating another year of survival against the unyielding forces of the mountain. The sheer determination of these sky nomads, who willingly risk their lives twice a year to maintain an ancestral connection to these high pastures, is deeply moving. It forces us to think about the invisible threads that tie us to our own histories, and what we are willing to endure to keep our heritages alive. In a modern society that prioritizes ease, comfort, and convenience above all else, we have largely severed our connection to the primal rhythms of the earth. If you were faced with the choice between a life of modern, predictable comfort and a life of raw, dangerous freedom like that of the Tusheti shepherds, which would you choose? Would you have the courage to drive your flock over the Abano Pass, knowing that your survival depended entirely on your own strength, your loyal dogs, and the mercy of the mountain? Please take a moment to reflect on this, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think we have lost something vital by separating ourselves from these ancient rhythms, or is the sacrifice of the shepherds a relic of a past we are better off leaving behind? Tell me your thoughts, hit the like button, and share this video to help keep the memory of these sky nomads alive. But our journey is about to take us from the silent, windswept highlands down into the beating heart of the Caucasus, where an ancient city built on warm, bubbling sulfur springs has served for 1,500 years as the chaotic, beautiful crossroads of global empires. Let us descend from the clouds, for Tbilisi is waiting to reveal its layers of history. We begin our descent from the isolated, windswept clouds of Tusheti, watching the rugged slate ridges of the high Caucasus slowly soften as they roll southward into the warm, fertile valleys below. The absolute, deafening silence of the highland pastures gradually gives way to a low, rhythmic hum, the ancient, unmistakable pulse of a city that has survived for over 1,500 years as the chaotic, beautiful crossroads of the world. This is Tbilisi, the beating heart and capital of Georgia. Tucked tightly into a dramatic, bowl-like basin carved over epochs by the rushing, emerald-green waters of the Mtigveri River, Tbilisi is a city forged by a unique alliance of geology, thermal energy, and relentless imperial collision. It is a place where you do not merely walk through history. You breathe it in through the heavy, damp mist of natural hot springs that rise directly from the volcanic fractures of the earth below. According to ancient Georgian legend, the founding of this city was dictated not by a committee of planners, but by a sudden, tragic twist of nature. In the 5th century AD, King Vakhtang Gorgasali was hunting in the dense, primeval forests that then covered this valley. His favored royal falcon pursued a pheasant into the air, and both birds descended rapidly out of sight into a deep ravine. When the king's hunting party finally scrambled down the steep cliffs to retrieve them, they found both birds floating silently in a natural steaming pool of water, boiled alive by the intense heat of the earth. Struck by the profound mystery of these naturally warm waters, and recognizing the immense strategic potential of a valley, sheltered by high mountain ridges on 3 sides, the king ordered the forests cleared and declared that a new capital would rise upon this heated ground. He named it Tbilisi, a word derived directly from the Old Georgian term Tbili, meaning warm. The physical landscape of Tbilisi is a visual testament to this geothermal origin. At the base of the ancient Narikala fortress, which clings like a stone dragon to the steep cliffs overlooking the city, sits the historic Abanutubani district. Here, the earth literally breathes. The skyline of this ancient neighborhood is defined not by towering skyscrapers, but by a series of low, organic, red brick domes rising directly from the cobblestone streets. These domes are the roofs of the city's legendary sulfur baths, constructed directly over the natural thermal springs. Inside these subterranean stone chambers, naturally carbonated, mineral-rich water bubbles up from depths of several kilometers, maintaining a constant, soothing temperature of 38 degrees Celsius to 40 Fahrenheit to 104 Fahrenheit. For centuries, these baths were not merely places of physical hygiene. They were the absolute centers of social, political, and commercial life. Here, caravan merchants washed away the dust of the Silk Road, political alliances were whispered in the warm steam, and marriages were arranged over tea, while the high, vaulted brick ceilings amplified the soft, echoing chatter of a dozen different languages. To walk the narrow, labyrinthine streets of Tbilisi's old town is to experience a visual and emotional sensory overload. The architecture does not follow a single, predictable style. Instead, it represents a complex, beautiful layering of civilizations that have fought for control of this valley. Colorful, intricately carved wooden balconies, painted in soft pastel blues, greens, and turquoises, lean precariously over the cobblestone alleys, looking as though they are holding each other up in a permanent, structural embrace. Many of these residential courtyards, known locally as Italian courtyards, are completely open, communal spaces where families have shared their daily lives, their meals, and their music for generations. Yet, standing directly beside these delicate, organic wooden structures are the heavy, windowless stone walls of early medieval Orthodox churches, the elegant tiled facades of Persian-style bathhouses, the quiet domes of historic synagogues, and the slender minarets of historic mosques. Tbilisi was a city where the call to prayer from a mosque, the toll of an Orthodox church bell, and the chanting of a synagogue could all be heard within the same narrow city block. This extraordinary cultural and religious coexistence was not a modern luxury, it was a matter of survival. Sitting at the narrowest point of the isthmus between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, Tbilisi was the ultimate gatekeeper of trade. For centuries, the wealth of the East and the West had to flow through the gates of this city. Consequently, Tbilisi became a prized trophy for every expanding empire in Eurasian history. It was captured, burned and rebuilt at least 40 times. Persians, Arabs, Seljuk Turks, Mongols, Byzantine Romans, and Imperial Russians have all laid siege to these stone walls, each leaving an indelible mark upon the genetics, the language, the cuisine, and the architecture of the city. Yet Tbilisi never lost its soul. It absorbed these foreign influences, wrapping them in its own unyielding identity, creating a unique urban tapestry where Europe and Asia do not merely meet. They dissolve into one another. But to find the oldest roots of this urban instinct, we must travel west from the city streets, following the winding path of the empty Kavari River, as it cuts through the dry, sun-baked sandstone hills of central Georgia. Here, carved directly into the sheer cliffs of a windswept plateau, lies Uplistsikhe, the Lord's Fortress. Dating back to the early Iron Age, around the 1st millennium BC, Uplistsikhe is one of the oldest rock-cut settlements in the entire Caucasus region. Long before the first stone church was built or the first brick laid in Tbilisi, ancient human hands began the monumental, exhausting task of carving an entire, functional city directly out of the living sandstone cliff. Uplistsikhe was not a temporary camp or a simple mountain refuge. It was a massive, highly sophisticated urban center that once housed over 20,000 people. At its height, the city spanned several hectares and was organized around a complex, highly advanced system of streets, public squares, residential quarters, and water drainage channels. Using simple iron tools, the ancient stonecutters hollowed out massive communal halls, elaborate pagan temples dedicated to the sun god, hidden wine cellars, bakeries, and even a large amphitheater-like theater complete with a carved stone stage and acoustic chambers. Deep, vertical shafts were driven through the solid rock down to the riverbed below, providing the city with a secure, secret source of fresh water in times of siege. Walking through these silent, windswept stone corridors today feels like entering a fossilized memory of human civilization, a place where the boundaries between nature and human engineering have been completely erased. What makes Uplistsikhe so emotionally arresting is the physical evidence of its spiritual and political transformation. For nearly 1,000 years, the city was the absolute center of pagan worship in the eastern Georgian kingdom of Iberia. But in the early 4th century, when Christianity was declared the state religion, a violent ideological struggle swept through these stone chambers. The ancient pagan altars were destroyed, and the temples of the sun were repurposed or sealed. In the 9th century, a three-aisled Christian basilica was constructed directly on top of the ruins of the most sacred pagan temple, physically anchoring the new faith onto the bones of the old. It is a powerful, physical manifestation of the cultural layering of the Caucasus, a place where one belief system literally rests upon the foundation of another, carved into the same unyielding stone. As the river valley continues westward, the dry, parched sandstone cliffs of Uplistsikhe gradually give way to a landscape that is completely different, a visual and emotional pattern interrupt that heals the eyes. This is Borjomi Karagali National Park, a vast lush green sanctuary that covers more than 850 square kilometers, 330 square miles, of protected wilderness. Here the air is thick, cool and rich with the scent of damp moss, pine needles and wild earth. Elevations range from 800 meters to over 2,600 meters, creating a dense network of ecological zones where gray wolves, lynx, and Caucasian brown bears still roam freely through the primeval forests. Deep within these wooded gorges run the natural, cold mineral springs of Borjomi, famous throughout Eurasia for their highly mineralized, naturally carbonated waters. It is a place of profound ecological decompression, a green lung that stands in stark, beautiful contrast to the parched stone ruins of the past, reminding us that nature always has the final healing word in this land of extremes. The sheer physical endurance of these ancient places, From the sulfur-heated streets of Tbilisi to the hand-carved sandstone halls of Uplistsikhe, compels us to reflect on the nature of our own modern existence. Today, we build our cities and our lives out of materials that are increasingly virtual, fleeting, and temporary. We store our memories on servers, build our communities on screens, and construct our homes out of fragile, mass-produced materials that will not survive a single century of neglect. Yet, the ancient peoples of the Caucasus built their lives directly into the bones of the earth, carving their hopes, their faiths, and their identities into solid rock that has survived earthquakes, fires, and the march of 40 different empires. It makes one wonder about what we are truly leaving behind for the generations to come. If our modern civilization were to suddenly vanish tomorrow, what is the single monument or creation of your life that would survive the test of 1,000 years? Would your legacy stand like the stone halls of Uplistsikhe, or would it dissolve into the wind like digital dust? Take a moment to look inward, and share your deepest reflections in the comments below. I read every single story, and your thoughts bring a beautiful, human connection to this journey. If this exploration of Tbilisi's warm heart and Uplistsikhe's cold stone moved you, please hit the like button. Share this video with someone who loves history, and make sure you are subscribed to Earth Discovered, so we can keep uncovering the secrets of our world. But our journey is about to venture even deeper into the vertical unknown. As we turn our path south, the green forests of Borjomi vanish, replaced by a sheer, near-vertical river gorge, where an entire, 13-story cave city containing thousands of rooms was carved into a volcanic cliffside to serve as a secret sanctuary for a legendary queen. Let us move forward, for the spectacular fortress of Vardzia is waiting to be uncovered. As you travel further south, leaving behind the warm valleys of Kakheti and the bustling streets of Tbilisi, the earth begins to change. The lush green forests gradually dissolve, replaced by the rugged volcanic terrain of historic Samtskhe Javaketi. Here the landscape takes on a stark, ancient quality, where sheer cliffs of grey-brown basalt and tuff loom over the roaring waters of the Kura River. It is in this dramatic vertical gorge, carved into the southern slopes of Erosheti Mountain, that you will find one of the most breathtaking wonders of human engineering and absolute self-preservation ever constructed: the cave city of Vardzia. From a distance, the mountain looks like a colossal, stone honeycomb, its cliff face pierced by hundreds of dark, silent openings that reveal a hidden, subterranean world. This is not merely a monument. It is a monument to defiance, built during the golden age of the Georgian kingdom, to protect an entire civilization from the relentless threat of invasion. The story of Vardzia begins in the late 12th century, during the reign of King Georgi III. The kingdom was constantly threatened by the aggressive expansions of the Seljuk, Turks and Persian empires. Recognizing the need for an impregnable border fortress, Georgi ordered the first caves chipped out of the soft volcanic stone, high above the river gorge. But it was his legendary daughter, Queen Tamar, who ruled not as a consort, but as a king, commanding a vast empire that stretched from the Caspian to the Black Sea, who transformed this military outpost into a massive, self-sustaining vertical city. Fearing the unstoppable advance of the Mongol hordes, Tamar ordered the complex significantly enlarged and deepened. At its peak, Vardzia was a bustling human anthill, containing over 6,000 individual apartments, spread across 13 floors and 19 distinct tiers. It housed up to 50,000 residents in times of siege, complete with a throne room, a library, bakeries, stables, meeting halls, and 25 massive wine cellars containing nearly 200 giant clay jars buried directly into the stone floors. To prevent invading forces from ever discovering the true scale of this sanctuary, the entire city was completely hidden within the interior of the mountain. The only way in and out was through a series of secret, heavily guarded tunnels and hidden doors situated near the riverbank. But the names of these places are rarely born of strategy alone. They are often born of human intimacy. According to local folklore, when Tamar was a young girl, she was out exploring the dark, half-finished caves of the mountain with her uncle, King Georgi. In the maze of stone chambers, the young princess became separated from the royal party. When her worried uncle called out her name in the darkness, her sweet voice echoed back through the stone corridors. Akvar, Zia. Which in Georgian translates directly to, "I am here, uncle." This spontaneous cry of a lost child would forever name the great fortress, Vardzia. For nearly a century, this vertical fortress worked perfectly, shielding the kingdom's spiritual and physical treasures from the fires of external wars. But the greatest threat to Vardzia did not come from the armies of the south. It came from the very foundations of the earth itself. In the year 1283, a massive, catastrophic earthquake ripped through the Samtskhe-Javakheti region. The intense tremors tore at the Erusheti mountain, causing a massive landslide that sheared off the entire outer face of the cliff. In a single terrifying moment, more than 2/3 of the cave city collapsed into the gorge below. The secret interior of the fortress was violently exposed to the sky, transforming the hidden, protected sanctuary into the open, visible honeycomb we see today. The natural protection of the mountain was gone, leaving the remaining caves and the monks, who lived there highly vulnerable to future raids. Yet, despite the devastation, the spiritual heart of Vardzia remained intact. The Church of the Dormition. Stepping inside this spacious, rock-cut cathedral is an experience of profound emotional and artistic weight. Every single square inch of the towering, 30-foot-high walls is covered in beautiful, colorful frescoes, painted in the late 12th century. These murals have survived over 800 years of earthquakes, dampness, and fires set by invading soldiers. On the north wall, the elegant pale face of Queen Tamar herself looks down upon the quiet chamber, her royal robes rendered in rich, dark pigments. Beneath her portrait, an ancient inscription whispers a timeless prayer: God grant her a long life. For centuries, 5 silent monks have lived in the normal stone buildings at the base of the cliff, ascending into the ancient cave monastery every morning at 7, to ring the bell in the high stone arch, keeping the spiritual fire of Vardzia burning in the dark. But Vardzia is not the only place where the search for spiritual solitude was carved into the bones of the earth. If you travel further east, where the lush river valleys fade into a dry, sun-baked desert on the contested border between Georgia and Azerbaijan, you will find a landscape that feels entirely extraterrestrial. This is the David Garaja Monastery Complex. Founded in the 6th century by Saint David, one of the 13 Assyrian fathers who came to spread the faith, this sanctuary is the absolute antithesis of Vardzia's vertical hive of community. Here, the rolling parched hills stretch toward the horizon in endless layered waves of red, orange, and gray sandstone. In this semi-arid wilderness, where summer temperatures regularly exceed 35 degrees Celsius, the monks sought absolute, quiet isolation, carving their cells, chapels and dining halls directly into the exposed sandstone ridges. Inside these quiet caves, medieval artists painted breathtaking, 1,000-year-old frescoes directly onto the rough rock, depicting scenes of divine peace in a landscape that offers no shade, no water, and no comfort. Today, David Garaja sits at the center of a tense, modern border dispute between two nations, a reminder that even the most sacred sanctuaries of the past are not immune to the political divisions of the present. The borderline runs directly along the ridge of the mountain, separating the monasteries and restricting access to some of the most historic cave frescoes. Yet, the silent power of these rock-cut sanctuaries remains undefeated, forcing us to confront the deep, timeless human desire to escape the physical constraints of the world. As we look upon these incredible hand-carved cities of Vardsia and David Gareja, we are forced to ask ourselves a profound question about the environments we choose to build for our own souls. In our modern interconnected lives, we are constantly surrounded by the noise, the demands, and the digital chatter of a crowded world, yet we often feel deeply, internally isolated. If you had to choose between these two ancient ways of living, between the crowded vertical cooperative hive of Vardsia, where your survival depended entirely on the tight community around you, and the absolute, sun-baked silence of David Gareja, where your only companion was the quiet of the desert, which would your soul choose? Would you seek the safety of the collective, or the freedom of the empty desert? Please take a moment to reflect on this, and share your thoughts in the comments section below. Your insights and stories bring a beautiful, human connection to this journey, helping us build our own digital community here at Earth Discovered. If this descent into the hidden, rock-cut sanctuaries of the Caucasus moved you, please hit the like button, share this video with someone who is searching for their own quiet sanctuary, and make sure you are subscribed, so we can continue our journey to the high, volcanic plains of Armenia. Let us move forward, for the ancient waters of Lake Sevan and the pagan columns of Garni are waiting to be uncovered next. Moving south from the humid green corridors of Martvili Canyon, where emerald green rivers flow between vertical limestone walls, we cross into a land where the earth becomes drier, harsher, and older. We enter the volcanic highlands of Armenia, a territory defined by a continuous, poetic dialogue between human faith and unyielding stone. Our first destination in this ancient plateau is a vast inland ocean set high above the world. This is Lake Sevan, situated at a breathtaking altitude of 1,900 meters above sea level. It is one of the largest high-altitude freshwater lakes in the entire world, spanning some 1,240 square kilometers of deep blue waters. Surrounded by a crown of barren volcanic mountain ridges, Savannovank Monastery sits perched on a high peninsula overlooking the deep, azure expanse. The dark volcanic stone of the monastery stands stark, dramatic contrast to the shifting blue hues of the lake. But the beauty of Sevan is paired with a story of profound environmental trauma and human interference. In the mid-20th century, Soviet central planners executed a series of massive, aggressive engineering projects, diverting Sevan's fresh waters for agricultural irrigation and hydroelectric power generation. In a matter of decades, the water level dropped by nearly 20 meters, shrinking the lake's surface area, exposing prehistoric archaeological ruins, and destabilizing the delicate high-altitude ecosystem. Today, it remains a fragile giant, where ongoing restoration efforts slowly battle to raise the water level back to its historical basin, proving that our footprints on the Earth can easily fracture what took nature millions of years to build. Traveling further into the parched, basalt gorges of the Armenian highlands, you encounter a sight that feels completely out of place in a region dominated by dark, monastic stone. Rising proudly above a triangular cliff overlooking the Azat River Gorge, sits Garni Temple. Built in the 1st century AD, this majestic, colonnaded structure is the only standing pagan Greco-Roman temple in the entire post-Soviet world. Featuring 24 elegant Ionic columns carved from solid basalt, Garni was dedicated to Miha, the ancient Armenian god of the sun, light and truth. Its alignment was calculated with precise astronomical significance, designed so that the morning sun would illuminate the sacred altar deep inside the inner sanctuary. When Armenia adopted Christianity as its state religion in 301 AD, practically every pagan temple in the nation was systematically demolished. Yet Ghani survived, protected by the royal family who repurposed it as a summer residence. Though a devastating earthquake in 1679 collapsed the entire structure, a meticulous, large-scale reconstruction in the 1970s used the original fallen stones to raise the columns once again, restoring a rare classical link to Armenia's pre-Christian heritage. Just beneath the temple, deep inside the sheer cliffs of the Ghani Gorge, lies a natural wonder that mirrors the geometry of human architecture. This is the Symphony of Stones, a spectacular geologic formation of massive basalt columns. Over millions of years, cooling volcanic lava contracted to form near-perfect, vertical hexagonal prisms that rise hundreds of feet into the air. Hanging suspended over the rushing river, these columns resemble a colossal, frozen pipe organ carved by the tectonic forces of the earth. When the mountain winds blow through the gorge, it is easy to imagine that the cliffs themselves are playing a silent, majestic song of creation, where the boundaries between organic human design and raw geology dissolve completely. But the ultimate synthesis of stone, faith and survival lies just a few kilometers up the river valley, tucked deep inside a narrow amphitheater of blood-red cliffs. This is Geghard Monastery, a holy sanctuary, whose name translates directly to the Monastery of the Spear. Founded in the 4th century by Gregory the Illuminator, the complex is legendary for once housing the Holy Lance, the spear said to have pierced the side of Christ during the crucifixion. But what makes Geghard an architectural miracle is not what was built upon the cliffs, but what was carved directly into them. Several of the monastery's grand vaulted churches and chapels are not constructed from stone blocks. They are excavated directly out of the solid, active volcanic rock. Walking into the pitch-black Avazan chamber, you are standing inside a cathedral hollowed out of the mountain itself. The medieval stonemasons carved these chambers with an incredibly sophisticated understanding of acoustic engineering. A single, whispered chant in the center of the dark rock chamber resonates with a powerful, echoing depth that sounds like a chorus of angels, the volcanic stone absorbing the sound and releasing it with a haunting, rich warmth. Outside the caves, the cliff faces are lined with kachkars, intricately carved Armenian cross stones. Each kachkar is a unique masterwork of stone carving, combining delicate floral lace patterns with sacred Christian symbols, permanently weaving human art into the very fabric of the mountainside. Preserving and documenting these ancient, crumbling sanctuaries requires months of research, translation and intensive creative labor, which we bring to you entirely for free. Yet, the vast majority of people will scroll past this video without a single thought of appreciation. We ask you to prove that you are different, that you are a mindful, active explorer who believes in keeping history alive. If you could carve a single, permanent monument of your own life, values, or beliefs directly into the solid rock of a canyon wall, something meant to survive for 1,000 years, what single symbol, word, or design would you choose to leave behind for future generations? Take 10 seconds to share your legacy in the comments below. Your answer directly signals to the algorithm that deep, educational storytelling deserves to be shared with the world. Hit that like button, share this documentary with someone who loves history, and make sure you are subscribed to Earth Discovered, so we can complete this epic journey. But our final chapter lies just ahead. We must journey to Khor Virap, where Gregory the Illuminator was locked in a deep pit beneath the colossal backdrop of Mount Ararat, before finishing our path at the vast shorelines of the Caspian Sea, where the mountains finally dissolve into the water. Our journey across the volcanic plateaus of the South Caucasus reaches its spiritual and geographic climax as we descend into the broad, sun-baked plains of the Ararat Valley. Here, standing solitary upon a low hill of dark rock, sits the ancient monastery of Khor Virap. The name translates directly to deep dungeon, and to step beneath its stone foundations is to descend into the very cradle of a nation's identity. It was here in the late 3rd century that Gregory the Illuminator was cast into a subterranean pit by the pagan king Tiridates III. For 13 long years, Gregory survived in this pitch-black, suffocating hole, surrounded by filth and venomous snakes, kept alive only by the secret kindness of a Christian widow who threw bread into the darkness. When the king was struck down by a madness that reduced him to the behavior of a wild boar, Gregory was summoned from the pit. He healed the king, baptized the royal court, and in the year 301 AD, led Armenia to become the first nation on earth to declare Christianity its official state religion. Today, you can climb down the vertical iron ladder into that very pit, feeling the cold, damp stone walls press against you, and breathe the heavy, silent air of a dungeon that changed the course of global history. Yet, when you emerge back into the blinding mountain sunlight, you are confronted by a sight of such staggering, vertical scale that it stops your breath. Rising directly behind the monastery, completely dominating the horizon, is the colossal, snow-capped twin summit of Mount Ararat. Standing over 5,100 meters high, more than 16,800 feet, this dormant volcano rises with a majestic, symmetrical presence that feels impossibly close, even though it stands just across the closed modern border. It is a visual threshold of mythic proportions, the legendary resting place of Noah's Ark, a mountain that represents both the end of the old world and the rebirth of the new. As we turn our path away from the open plains of Ararat, the terrain begins to tighten once again, pulling us into a narrow, winding canyon carved by the Amagu River. Suddenly, the gray basalt of the plains is replaced by a landscape of violent, passionate color. Noravank Monastery sits at the head of a gorge lined with vertical, blood-red limestone cliffs that rise up to 300 meters, roughly 1,000 feet, into the sky. At sunset, when the iron-rich rock catches the final rays of the fading sun, the entire canyon seems to burn with a deep orange fire, casting a warm, celestial glow over one of the most remarkable churches ever built by human hands. This is the Serb Astvatsatsin, a double-decker tomb church constructed in the early 14th century by the legendary master architect and sculptor Momik. What makes this church a daring masterpiece of medieval engineering is its exterior facade. To reach the second-floor chapel, worshippers must ascend a narrow, cantilevered stone staircase that climbs directly along the outer wall of the church. With no railings, no safety nets, and no room for distraction, every step upward along this sheer stone ledge is a physical act of faith, a reminder that the path to the divine has never been easy or safe. Momik, who was slowly losing his eyesight as he carved the delicate stone reliefs that adorned the portals, infused this place with a tragic, unyielding beauty that has survived earthquakes, wars, and the relentless passage of time. To reach the final and most remote fortress of the southern Caucasus, we must cross a vast, dizzying canyon that drops nearly 500 meters, about 1,600 feet, to the rushing waters of the Vorotan River below. Perched like a stone crown on the very edge of a sheer basalt plateau sits Tatev Monastery. Founded in the 9th century, Tatev was far more than a place of quiet prayer. It was the absolute intellectual, spiritual, and military fortress of southern Armenia. At its height, the monastery housed a medieval university where hundreds of scholars, philosophers, and artists copied precious manuscripts, studied science, and kept the flame of human knowledge alive during centuries of foreign invasions. Today, the journey to this clifftop sanctuary is made via the wings of Tatev, a state-of-the-art cable car that stretches 5.7 kilometers, approximately 3.5 miles, across the massive gorge. As you glide silently in the glass cabin, suspended hundreds of feet above the vertical abyss, the sheer strategic brilliance of Tatev's location becomes completely clear. The monastery's high stone walls blend seamlessly into the vertical cliffs, allowing its medieval defenders to monitor every movement through the deep valley below, creating an impregnable sanctuary of the mind and the soul. Leaving behind the high, glaciated plateaus and the silent monasteries of the mountains, we descend now into the dry windswept plains of Azerbaijan, where the Caucasus range begins to flatten and dissolve into the earth. Here, in the semi-desert territory of Gobustan, we find ourselves standing on a landscape that feels completely primordial, a place where the human story begins. Gobustan is home to a staggering collection of more than 6,000 prehistoric petroglyphs carved into the weathered surfaces of massive limestone boulders. Dating back up to 40,000 years, these ancient carvings depict hunting scenes, wild animals, primitive boats, and mysterious ritual dances, offering a rare visual archive of the very first humans who walked these shores. Yet, just a few miles from these ancient stones, the earth begins to bubble and pop with an unsettling geological restlessness. Azerbaijan is home to nearly half of all the mud volcanoes on our planet, with over 300 formations scattered across this parched landscape. Unlike traditional volcanoes that spew hot lava, these bizarre shifting cones erupt with pressurized methane gas and cold, mineral-rich gray mud. Standing amidst these bubbling, hissing mud domes, watching the earth quietly breathe and reshape itself in the silent desert, you feel as though you have stepped onto another planet, entirely. A raw, unfinished world where the boundary between life and geology is constantly blurred. Our epic journey across the Caucasus finally reaches its natural, sweeping resolution as the flat, windswept deserts of the east dissolve into a vast open horizon of water that stretches out to meet the sky. At first glance, the rolling waves and the salty breeze make it feel like the ocean. But the Caspian Sea is not a sea at all. Covering approximately 371,000 square kilometers, nearly 143,000 square miles, an area larger than the entire nation of Germany, the Caspian is officially the largest enclosed body of water on our planet. It is a giant, landlocked lake, a unique ecosystem where freshwater rivers like the Volga meet a slightly saline basin, creating a habitat found nowhere else on Earth. On parts of the shoreline, the modern gleaming skyscrapers of Baku rise like futuristic towers of glass and steel beside the water, while other coastal stretches remain completely flat, empty, and windswept, echoing with the ancient memories of the Silk Road traders who once rested upon these beaches. The Caucasus does not end with a peak. It dissolves into this vast quiet water, compressing the absolute extremes of Eurasia. From glaciated volcanoes and deep, blood-feud haunted valleys to hand-carved cave cities and bubbling mud deserts, into a concentrated, unforgettable space of human survival and natural wonder. We have traveled together through the vertical sanctuaries of Svaneti, climbed the frozen slopes of Kazbek, navigated the deadly hairpin turns of the Abano Pass, and stood in the rock-cut halls of Vardsia and Geghard. We have provided this entire cinematic journey, fully researched and edited over countless hours, to you completely for free, because we believe that the deep, hidden stories of our world deserve to be told with respect and emotional depth. If you have felt the majestic, quiet pull of these mountains, and if you are ready to keep exploring the most extraordinary and overlooked corners of our planet, please take a moment to drop a comment below telling us which of these 9 chapters moved your soul the most. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see the world beyond the headlines, and make sure you are subscribed to Earth Discovered, with notifications turned on so you never miss our next epic journey. The world is vast, beautiful, and full of secrets, and we are just beginning to discover them.